Let's kick things off, guys. This is what we did yesterday. We covered a recap of everything we had done last week. We understood about headers. Some people understood, some people did not. We understood about the fetch API, how you can use the fetch API to send background requests to an HTTP server. This is the foreground request that goes out. Under the hood, there are a lot of background requests that go out. These go out using the fetch API in the browser. And we also looked at Axios, which was another library that will let your front end talk to your backend. This was covered yesterday. So if you skipped yesterday's class, these concepts, you'll have to go through in the offline video. Then we did a mini assignment. We created an HTTP server that would be like a calculator HTTP server. It would expose 4 endpoints, add, multiply, subtract, and divide. These are the 4 endpoints it was supposed to expose, and it was supposed to take inputs as query parameters. This is another thing we learned yesterday. Okay, whenever you go to a website like this, google.com/multiply a equal to 1 and b equal to 2, or your website/multiply, these are what are called query parameters. Anything you write after a question mark, you can provide a bunch of variables after a question mark, and c equal to something and name equal to Harkirat. This is one way to pass data to a backend. This is the popular way in GET requests to send data to the backend. So we created this. If you remember the code from yesterday, let me take you to the final code over here. It looked something like this. We used the Express library. We required it at the top. We created the app instance, and then we created 4 routes. One sum route handler, multiply, divide, and subtract route handler. All 4 of these did their respective things. For example, the /sum endpoint number 1 extracted a from rec.query.a. This request variable has all the details related to your request. And the thing that we extracted from here was the a and the b variable. Why? Because these are the variables that the user will send. This is the code of your backend. And what is being called on the front end? This is being called on the front end. So when the user sends you a and b, which could be dynamic variables, this is how you catch those dynamic variables on your backend route. And one extra thing we saw was here you have to parse this to an integer. If you just take it as such, this input is a string. This input is also a string. And when you add 2 strings together, they get concatenated. If you add 1 and 2 as strings, they get concatenated to 12, which is why we parse it down to an integer. This is a global function that JavaScript provides you that converts a string into an integer. Over here, we add the variables. Over here, we multiply the variables. Over here, we divide the variables. And over here, we subtract the variables, return it to the end user. Let's quickly write this code locally because we will be building on top of this. So for the people who use Replit, what do you have to do? You have to go to REPL.it, create a fresh REPL, or I'm just going to, I have 3 of these REPLs. You can only create 3 REPLs now on Replit. So I'm going to use an old one. You can create a fresh REPL, select Node.js over here, and you will see something like this. And here you can paste the code from the slides. Where is the code? In the slides on the create HTTP server endpoint. Here you can paste the HTTP server code and run it. The people who saw the summary video are already aware of this layout. This is Replit right here. He wrote a React project. We are writing a Node.js project. When we write this, Replit automatically installs Express for us. And as you can see, it says port 3000 open on this thing. If I click on this thing, it will take me to the HTTP server. I can also open this in a new tab. If I open this in a new tab, here I can see the code that I have written over here. I repeat, the code that I have written over here is hosted on the internet, is hosted on such a weird looking endpoint, but it is hosted somewhere. And if I go to /sum a equal to 1 and b equal to 2, it says answer :3. Where is this computation happening for summing a and b? It is happening on a Replit server somewhere. That is this specific route handler. This route handler handles the request that comes to /sum. Similarly, this one handles the request that comes to /multiply. What happens when you multiply 1 and 2? 1 into 2 is 2. Similarly, all the other endpoints. That is how you create raw endpoints in Express. Now there are 10 different things you can learn about here, for example, and we will learn about these eventually. How can you do better routing is one thing we will eventually learn. How can you add a database here? How can you store some data in a database? How can you add middlewares? This is the thing that we will be focusing on today. How can you add middlewares and what are middlewares in Express? Okay? Hoping you understand this code. If you don't understand the whole code, then feel free to delete everything but a single endpoint for now. So we have one test endpoint to play with. Given this test endpoint, make sure you're running it. If you want to run it locally, I'm sure you guys know the steps by now. Run it locally. If you want to run it here, you can run it here as well. This is a starter point for today. Let's look at what are middlewares and why do you use them in case of Express and even other frameworks. Any other Node.js framework and even a Golang HTTP framework will have the concept of middlewares. Do you need middlewares? No. You can always work without middlewares, but they provide you, there's just a cleaner way to write some syntax, but you can always work without them. In fact, I will happily show you that this is how you can write some code with middlewares. This is how you can write the same code without middlewares. So you don't need them, but they are good practice. Okay, cool. In Express.js, middleware refers to the functions that have access to the request, response, and a next function in the application's request response cycle. बहुत सारी, a lot of jargons here. Let's kick things off with the last thing. Request response cycle. What is this request response cycle? Okay, when the user goes to this URL, they are sending out a request. Where is that request getting handled? It is getting handled over here. There is a lot of code that runs over here. Then finally you return the data from here. It reaches the front end. This is the request response cycle. What is happening? Okay, this is the browser from where I'm going to, replit.com/sum A equal to 1 and B equal to 2, something like this. I go to this endpoint. What does this endpoint do? It hits an HTTP server. And यहाँ पे there is a handler that we have written, app.getHandler that runs some code and returns the response to the user. This is called the request response cycle. And what is a middleware again? If you go to the definition, in Express, middleware refers to functions that have access to the request object, response object, and some next function. We will get to what this is in the application's request response cycle. Middleware is कि यार आपकी request response cycle तो चल रही है. This is the request that goes out, and let's say this is the code that actually handles the request. Let me put this code over here. This is the code that actually handles the request. A middleware is another function. I repeat, a middleware is another function that has access to the request response cycle. मतलब यार जो request आ रही है ना, what if it gets routed through a middleware? What was the middleware? It is a function only. अंत में it is a function only. It is defined like this only. But it has access to the request object, the response object, and one more thing called next. Does our final route handler have access to request and response? Yes, it does. The middleware is also a function like this. I repeat, the middleware, जैसे ये एक function है. This function is the final route handler, the final thing that catches your route. But wouldn't it be nice? It may or may not be nice. But wouldn't it be nice कि यार पहले एक function में आ जा. Request first come to one function, and from this function, if this function wants, if this middleware wants, the request can go to the route handler. But if this middleware wants to stop the request, this middleware can stop the request as well. What is a middleware? Refers to the function that has access to the request object, response object, and some next function we're not worried about. Middlewares can perform a variety of tasks, such as number one, modifying the request and response object. When the code reached here, मेरे को रिक्वेस्ट ऑब्जेक्ट को चेंज करना है. आई वांट टू चेंज इट टू रिक्वेस्ट डॉट यूजर आई डी इक्वल टू 1 और रिक्वेस्ट डॉट नेम इक्वल टू हरकीरत, वट एवर दैट इज. एंड वट एवर चेंज आई मेक ओवर हियर, द फाइनल route handler will also see that change in the request object. So what is the first purpose of a middleware? One reason people use a middleware is to modify the request object. We will see this exact use case when we reach authentication. There is some time before we reach authentication. When we reach there, we will see this exact use case, which is modifying the request or the response object. If this guy wants, it will change something here on the REST object. This guy will get the same change over here. That is the first thing it does. If you write a middleware in the future, it will just look like a function like this, jahan pe you can modify the request object. What is the second thing it does? Ending the request response cycle. This one is important. If you want, आप request को यहीं पे stop कर सकते हो. You can stop the request right here before it reaches the route handler. Route handler ऐसे का ऐसे रह जाएगा. Route handler, the control will never reach this line of code if you stop the request over here. How do you stop the request? It's a different question, but you do this in middlewares. What is the other thing that you do in middlewares? You stop the request right there. You make sure request doesn't go to the route handler. Why would you want to do this? Because sometimes these middlewares check, who is this person? Does this person have access to the some endpoint? And if they don't, then the middleware should stop the request right here. Anyone can send a request over here. If I go to, admin.google.com/passwords, let's say this is a website that only Google employees have access to, or let's say, employees.google.com. If I go here, I can send a request. Of course, something should block me. And that blocking can happen over here. I can end the cycle over here. क्या इसके आगे नहीं जाएगा तू. Request will not get forwarded to the real route handler. Middleware will be used for authentication. In fact, the biggest use case of middlewares is authentication only. We'll see that very soon. And what is the third thing it is used for? Calling the next function in the stack. What does that mean? It basically means, calling the actual route handler over here. That is the third thing it does. It will do one of three things. It will modify this, या तो इसको modify कर देगा, या तो इसको stop कर देगा, या it will either it may or may not modify these objects. Irrespective of whether it has modified, it can either stop the request or it can transfer the request to the next handler. As there is no third thing that can happen now. Number one, it may or may not change the request object, and then it will either stop the request right there or forward the request to the real route handler. That is what a middleware does. इसका use case क्या है? We will come to. We will come to its use case very soon. But this is what a middleware is supposed to do. Let's see it in action. Let's see how can you create a middleware of your own, and what is its real world use case. We have this code over here. Let's say there are two endpoints. Okay? Let's not say there is one endpoint. Let's say there are two endpoints. Let me write the code. You can eventually write it on your side. There is a sum endpoint. There is a multiply endpoint. And I ask you, create a global variable. Create a global variable called request count that counts the number of requests this server has, and also log the number of requests whenever either of these endpoints is hit. जब भी ये endpoint hit हो, increase the value of this variable. Whenever this endpoint is hit, again increase the value of this variable, and also log this variable on the screen. Okay, the number of requests that the server has handled equal to this number. How will you write this code? You will be like, ठीक यार, ये तो इसका main logic है. This is the main logic. Before the main logic runs, I will do a request count equal to request count plus 1 and console.log total number of requests equal to, let me write this in a slightly easier syntax, request count. If you want, you can also write the slightly prettier syntax, which looks something like this. Either one of these will work. You can either log dynamic variables like this, or add, a plus over here. If this feels confusing, feel free to ignore this one. These 2 lines of code I added. And do I have to write the same code over here? Yes. In the other endpoint also, in both the endpoints, I added 2 lines of code. यहाँ पे 2 lines of code, यहाँ पे 2 lines of code. So that the number of requests gets logged on the server. If I run this, you will see if I go to the multiply endpoint, I get the answer. Let me go here one more time. And also what gets logged over here, total number of requests equal to 1 and then total number of requests equal to 2. This is a nice thing you might want to track, right? कि तुम्हारी जो website है, your website, how many users is it getting? How many active requests is it getting? If I go to the sum endpoint, then also the same thing happens, total number of requests equal to 3, so on and so forth. So does this look like a middleware? Here I wrote some code that runs before the actual logic runs. What if I can do this? I create a function called request increaser. I repeat, I create a function called request increaser and I just call this function in both the places. Rather than duplicating code in both of these, I take the common code in a single function. I call the function over here. Yeah, request increaser and request increaser. Does it do the same thing? It still does the same thing. There is a function over here. I call it over here. I call it over here. What if there is a third endpoint? I can call it over there as well. If I add a divide endpoint, I will call this there as well. Will this work as expected? Hopefully should work as expected. This is very close to what a middleware does. You write a function, but the middleware can, number one, do some logic on its own. It can do something like this. It can modify the request object as well. Here, whenever this logic is running, what if I want you to, change the rec object and store the request count over there? What if I say, क्या ये जो request object है ना, the request object that you get over here needs to be modified in the function. This is a very bad example that I gave. You would never want to do this, but let's say I say this. Can you do that here? You cannot. The middleware does not have access to the request object. You wrote something that looks like a middleware, right? What was a middleware? The thing that runs before your actual route logic runs. You have a middleware, but this middleware doesn't have enough power right now. It doesn't have access to the request object and the response object. You might say, Kirat, I will do this. I will send the request and the response over here. I will say, yes, that is very good. If you do that, yes, then you're slowly creating your own type of middleware, which is also fine. Yes, you can do this. Harkirat, if I do this, will it work? Yes, you can say that. Okay, you have created sort of, a function which has access to the request object. Why would you want to do this? You would want to do this because, what did I say? What was one of the use cases of middlewares? Authentication. If I go to employee.google.com, I am sending a request. Something is blocking me. Wouldn't it be nice if the blocking happens in this function before the control even reaches here? Might be nicer, Kirat. So the same thing के लिए I need access to the request object. Unless मैं request में देख ही नहीं सकता. Somewhere in this request is hidden. Okay, who is this user? Is this Harkirat or is this a real Google employee? So that is why the middleware needs access to the request object. And we have sort of given our middleware access to a request object. So do we understand this code? Forget there is a thing called, middlewares. Do we understand if I ask you to create a request count thingy and, ask you to modify the request object so that यहाँ पे, if I write rec.request count, it prints the same thing that was set over here. Do we understand this code? This isn't middlewares. It's very close to what middlewares are. But, without knowing the jargon of middlewares, do we understand the code on the screen? Let me do a poll. Seems like Akash has gone for a food break. Launch. %83. Very quick 2-minute Q&A I will look at. Of course, the first thing I said is explain middleware again. So middleware is like a middleman in a business. You are right. It is like a middleman in a business. Here request is passed by reference. That is correct. If you pass an object, it is passed by reference in JavaScript. I could be wrong here, but 99% I'm sure. Middleware recap. So middleware is like a middleman. That is correct. Recap. So middleware is like a middleman. That is correct. Explain the last bit again. Ignore the last bit for now. ये request response जो मैंने यहाँ भेजा, ignore this for now. Ignore, the extra things that I talked about. Just this much so we understand. कि whenever a request comes over here, this function gets called that increases the request count, and then we log it over here. Let's see it in action one more time. If I run this code, open it in a new tab, I go to the /sum endpoint. What gets logged on the screen? Total number of requests equal to 1. How does it get logged on the screen? It gets logged on the screen because control reaches here. ये function call हो जाता है. This function gets called. We do this, we increase the number of requests, and then we log this on the screen. And we do the same thing on the multiply endpoint as well. This much hopefully we understand. Now let me change the syntax a bit. I'm doing nothing else, just changing the syntax a very little. Rather than calling request increaser here, without any arguments, rather than calling request increaser over here, let me delete this function call. And यहाँ पे let me write something, or even before that, let me put request increaser over here. Where did I put it? I am not calling it over here. I put it over here. I said app.get/sum. This is your first handler. After the first handler is done, it may or may not pass request to the second handler, which may or may not send forward the request to a third handler. The Express framework is nothing but a chain of middlewares. I repeat, the Express framework may, whenever you create a route handler, it is nothing but a chain of middlewares. You can have a middleware function here. This last function also is a middleware function only. This function also has access to the request and the response object, and I can put a function before it as well. सबसे पहले the control will reach here. Then the control will reach here. If this guy wants, what was the definition of middleware? It will either stop the request right there or forward it to the next route handler. So this guy will either stop the request over here or pass it to the next one. This thing that I've written over here is now a middleware. Pehle, what was I doing? I was calling request increaser over here. Now what am I doing? I just said here /sum endpoint. Pehle, this is your first handler. I can also take this code and paste it over here. I'm not going to, so it will look confusing. But I say pehle, the control will reach here. If this guy wants, it can forward the request to the next function. Let me name the next function. Let me create it separately and call it real sum handler. Okay, I have created two functions, one called real sum handler and one called the request increaser. Isn't this cleaner syntax to look at? Here app.get/sum. Whenever a request comes here, first go to the request increaser, that will increase the request. Then go to the real sum handler, which is handle the request. So that is why middlewares become useful. They're like, as someone said, a middleman before your final thing is called. And if the middleman wants, it can stop the request over there. If the middleman wants, it can call the next route handler afterwards. This is explained in a very toned down fashion in an offline video on week 4. So if you want to look at it, you should look at that as well. Now, if I run this, you will see the same code runs. The same thing happens. Nothing changes. Actually, something will change. When I write this code, what do I say? You are the first request handler. The first request handler also needs to look the same. It needs to have a request object. It needs to have a response object. And what was the definition of middlewares? It said in Express, middleware refers to the function that have access to the request object, response object, and the next function. They have access to another function called next. So whatever middlewares you use, whatever functions you write before the last handler have 3 arguments. The last handler also has 3 arguments, but so let's not get there. The last handler में you would usually, most of the times, only use rec and res. But in the request increaser, in any middleware, यहाँ पे middleware क्या है? This is a middleware. Here you would use request object also, response object also, and a next function. Can you guess what this next function is? The name itself is telling you. Firstly, you can name these whatever you want. I can name that request. I can name this RESSSPONSE. This variable name depends on me. Same for this third variable. This is usually called next. And इसका काम क्या है? क्या if you call the if you call next over here, अगर आपने next call कर दिया, if you call next over here, then the next function will get called. ये middleware है. This is a middleware. This sits in the middle. It gets 3 arguments. It does something with this request if it wants, with this response if it wants. And then if it calls next, तो ये अगला function call होगा. If it does not call next, then the next function will not get called. That is what a middleware is. It is a function only. You put it here, very similar to the final route handler. जैसे final route handler looks something like this. कि भाई function, some handler, request, response. You do your thing. You call rest.json. Now if you want, आप इसको यहाँ पे भी लिख सकते हो. You can write this code over here if you want, like we have until now. Or if you want, you can pull it out into a separate function like I've done over here. Express is nothing but a chain of middlewares. Right now we only have one middleware, but I could introduce a second middleware here as well. I'm not right now, just to keep things simple. But let's see what happens, Abhi. Let me write this code. Let me make it very simple. Remove the multiply endpoint completely. This is what our code looks like. Let's go from the top and understand the whole thing. Express is imported. App variable is created. We create a fresh app variable on this. Using this Express library, we create an instance of the app variable in Express. Then, okay, ignore this. I write a route handler. I write my very first route handler. Okay, whenever a request comes to /sum, first go here. And then if this guy wants, then go here. And hopefully the last one will, actually handle the request, which is something that happens here. In the last one, you can see we do some logic. We finally handle the request. We return some response to the user. And these, chain of handlers are what are called middlewares. In this case, request increaser is a middleware whose purpose is kya? Here before the actual route is hit, you need to be called, you need to increase this variable, you need to log something on the screen. If I call this next variable, then the control will reach here. This feels very confusing to a lot of people. You called the next variable here, Harkirat. How did this function get called? It got called. If you really look at how Express is written under the hood, you will see, when you call this next function, it understands that I need to pick up the next handler, picks up the next handler and calls it. But if you call this next function, then, iske baad jo middleware hai, that will get called, which in this case is this guy. And, that will handle the actual request. Now I have a pop-up that says my internet is very bad. So let me first show this in action and then we'll do a poll. Let me open this in a new tab. Let me go to the /sum endpoint. And notice it works the same. Just like it was working a while back. It is working now. I see a bunch of requests. Only the code now uses a middleware. Until now, what was I doing? I was just calling request increaser over here. You can still do that. Does the same thing only. But this request increaser doesn't have access to the, request object, response object. So you use middlewares. But I can totally get, as I said, you don't need middlewares. You can always do, जो भी आप middlewares के साथ कर रहे हो, whatever you are doing with middlewares, you can do without middlewares. What benefit do they give you? Slightly easier, way to read the code. Okay, when a request comes here, first this will handle the first request, then this will handle the second request. Now in the future, if you introduce a /multiply endpoint, then all you have to do is write request increaser here. It will start to increase the variable here as well. And the real multiply handler can handle the multiply request. Do we get a high level idea of middlewares? As I said, they do a few things here. We haven't yet gone there. But do we understand middlewares? Great. 90% is beautiful. Again, this figure is the best explanation of it. It is some code that is written. Now ignore what this app.use it, but it is some code that gets called first, then the final thing gets called. But what did we say? It can either modify the request or response object. Let's see that in action really quickly. What will I do? This is my middleware. यहाँ पे let me change the request object. rec.name equal to random harkirat123. For some reason, let me change the request object over here. And in the final real sum handler, let me log the request object rec.name. So you will see, the first middleware is able to change the request object. The second handler, the final handler, can access that over here. If I run this and go to the /sum endpoint, what gets printed over here? Random harkirat123. So my middleware was able to change the request object. My next handler was able to get that changed request object. If I had more middlewares after that, all of them will be able to access this, rec.name variable that I changed over here. What is the second thing it can do? The second thing it can do is calling the next middleware. Let's first go to the third thing. Calling the next middleware function in the stack. We already know this. कि भाई ये next function call किया, तो the next function in the middleware got called. What is the third thing it can do? Ending the request response cycle. If the middleware wants, it will not call next, and it will be like yaar rest.json message I ended the request early for whatever reason. As I said, these are used for authentication. So maybe he found something in my if rec.headers dot cookie is not equal to Google, if this person does not actually work at Google, then simply return right there. No need to call, simply return right there. No need to call the next function. We will see this eventually when we reach authentication. But what am I doing in this middleware now? कि मैं check कर रहा हूँ यार कि ये जो request object है, has the user sent me some information stating कि they are an employee at Google? If that is true, if they are an employee at Google, then I will call the next function. Else, I will stop the request right there. Again, what have I written over here? Okay, let's say this was an authentication middleware, and you were visiting a website like employee.google.com. When you go to a website like employee.google.com, the request will first reach here. This guy will check, यार तुम्हारे headers में मुझे देखने दो. Let's say in your body, let me see. Are you an employee at Google? If you are, then ठीक है, go to the actual handler. If you are not, then we stop the request right there. The next handler never gets called. So what is the third thing that a middleware can do? It can stop the request response cycle. These are like gates. Here first you will do your add something to the request response object. Then there might be a second one that will do its own thing. Then eventually there is the final one. To reach the final one, you have to go through a bunch of steps. Any one of these steps, if they want, they will stop the request right there. How is this stopping the request? Because it did not call the next function. If you call the next function will get called. Let's say this guy right here. But if I don't call the next function and send a response back, then the request has sort of ended. If I don't call next and I don't return response to the user, we'll get to that very soon. But let's see this in action really quickly. Let's see. Logged. Control reached the real handler. Will the control reach the real handler? It shouldn't, right? Because yahin pe I never called next. In the request increaser middleware, I never call next, so the next control will never reach here. What does it say? I ended the request early. Even though I'm sending a request to /sum, the request is first reaching a middleware and the middleware is stopping the request right there. It is not forwarding it to the real handler. It is stopping it right here. Oh. Sorry about that, my camera went out. So that is what is happening in this specific code over here, which is we are ending the request early. What happens if I don't call next, so don't do rest.json also, the request will remain hung. The same thing would happen अगर तुम्हारे पास एक ही handler होता. If you had a single handler and in this handler you wouldn't say rest.json, the request remains hung. The user just sees, loading over here. So the same thing will happen. So ideally you should either call rest.json here or call next. You should do one of these two things. If you are not doing this, then the request of the user will remain hung. तुम आगे भी नहीं दे रहे हो, तुम respond back भी नहीं कर रहे हो. If you are a middleware, you should do one of these two things. या तो stop the request right there, let the user know कि you are done, or send the request to the next handler. So there should usually always is a condition like this. कि if some condition is true, then return this to the end user. Else call next. Hopefully that is easy enough to digest. Okay, what is happening here? Let's do a poll. That's all that's there in Middlewares, if I'm being honest. 40 minutes, great. Iske baad a lot of practicing. So let's do a poll. Okay, great. 90% is beautiful. One more thing I should tell is there is one more way to add a middleware. एक तो ये है कि in individual route handlers you write the respective middleware. For example, in multiply you might not want it कि यार multiply वाले में I don't want the request to increase. Or let me give you an actual use case कि यार in /sum and /multiply you should increase the request, but there should be a /admin endpoint जहाँ पे you shouldn't, and this admin endpoint should return to the user कि कितनी requests हो गई. rest.json message total number of requests on the server is request count. What is this admin endpoint doing? कि यार मेरे पास request आएगी ना, when a request comes to me, I will not call this because this is an admin endpoint. When this endpoint gets called, you shouldn't increase this variable over here. But on the other endpoints you should. तो यहाँ पे you can specify the middleware. यहाँ पे I did not specify the middleware. But let's say there is something you want to run on every route. I repeat, there is something you want running on every route. So you can either specify it, like this कि भाई तो यहाँ भी, or you can write this code app.use request increaser, and then you don't have to write it individually. When you write app.use request increaser, all the route handlers that are after that, I repeat, this guy, and this guy will automatically get the first, middleware like this. So when you use the app.use syntax, then इसके बाद वाले जितने भी endpoints हैं, all the endpoints that come after it will get that middleware automatically. It's just an easy way for you to specify a global middleware. Okay, all the handlers after this, please use this middleware. If there is some code above it, that will not. If यहाँ पे there is an admin endpoint, this admin endpoint will not use the request increaser middleware. All the endpoints that come after will use the request increaser middleware. So, that is just another way for you to specify middlewares. You can either do the hard work of, I've written it over here and then, I've written it on the second place and third place, or single line of code में you can say कि इसके नीचे जितने भी हैं, all of these afterwards, please use this middleware. All right. Hopefully that's straightforward. Let's do some assignments. Assignment number 1 is we've done both of these things. Create a middleware that logs each incoming request's HTTP method, URL, timestamp to the console. Whenever a request comes, इसकी ये तीनों चीजें we want logged on the screen. So let's say you have some very basic code over here. Let me write the very basic code, and would urge you to write it on your side as well, because the more you write, the more you get comfortable with the syntax. Basically just take the code from slide number 4, the final code over here. Take the code from slide number 4. Let me paste the slides in chat one more time. Take the code from slide number 4, paste it on Replit, and over there try to solve the first assignment. Second one is take home. So second one you can do घर जाके. इसके बाद there is one important thing we need to cover, which is course and one more important wo. So let's quickly do this in 5 minutes, and then we will understand about course and another important middleware in Express before we call it for the day. So would urge you to quickly finish the assignment. What was the assignment? Okay, given this code, add a middleware that logs the method, timestamp, and the URL on which the request is coming. Fairly simple, right? Function, middleware. What does the middleware take as inputs? The middleware takes the request object as input, response object as input, and the next function as input. What does it need to do? It needs to log method is. Now here you need to Google, okay, given this request object, how can you find कौन सा method call किया हुआ है, which method is called, how can you find that given this request object? The answer is, rec.method. And the way you would find that is you would Google express how to find method in request handler. And what does the first result say? It says, an example source code, this thing. Oh, this is a different question. How to find method in middleware. Let's search that. There you go. The answer is here only. Here only it says function logger console.log rec.method. And when we learn TypeScript, it will become even easier to figure out, how to find these things. What was the other thing? The URL. That again, you will Google. I actually have no idea how you get the URL. This might be it, this might not be it. And what was the third thing? The current time, which you can get by, just logging new date. This date class we have discussed in the past. It gives you the current time on the server. Just log this over here. And then what is the last thing that is left? Calling the next function. That is all you have to do. Or is there something that I've missed? I have defined the middleware. How do you use the middleware? You call app.use middleware, or you should give it a better name, something like logger or logger middleware. So that is how you were supposed to do this assignment. There is another assignment for that you can target afterwards. What was the assignment? Given these handlers, anytime a request comes, please log the method, please log the host name, or the URL on which the request came, and then the current time. Arkiyat, what is the use case of this? There are many use cases, right? You can have a very long log file. I repeat, you can have a very long log file, and you can process that log file to see how many requests are you getting, how many methods are being hit. Eventually, when we reach monitoring, you will see, this is exactly how sometimes monitoring is done. And, you count the number of requests that are getting a status code of 500, 400, things like these. So that is what this logger middleware is used for. In fact, there will be more assignments this week. Jahan pe it will become, you'll be asked to log the status codes of the response as well. So that will be, another challenging problem, but let's not go there. Hopefully we understand this. Let me quickly show this in action. If I run this itself, first request is for method is get, host is, it says /. So seems like this is the route rec.url actually host is / over here. Let me open this in a new tab. It says /. So rec.url probably returns you the route. Let me go here. It says host is / some question mark a equal to 1 and b equal to 2. So how can I find the actual, again, I'm just guessing here. You will Google and find the answer. But let's see if the answer is in request.hostname. And the answer is correct. Rec.hostname is what gives you the host name where the request came. And what was the other thing that we saw? Rec.url. That is the route where the request came. So, you can make this log as verbose as possible. But now if I go to this endpoint a few times, I get a bunch of these logs. Why is it coming? Irrespective of if I go to the sum endpoint or the multiply endpoint, the answer is because I've used this middleware throughout my application. What if I put this afterwards? I think this should work. I could be wrong. Let's see. What did I say? कि जब आप app.use लिखते हो, when you write app.use, all the routes afterwards get that route handler. Let's see if that is true. That may not be true. If I run this, and now if I go to the sum endpoint, let's see if the log comes or not. If I go to the sum endpoint a few times, the log did not come. Why? Because app.use got defined after the route handler. So, a lot of times this becomes a problem. You define it at the end and you're like, why is the middleware not running? The answer is the middleware will only run for routes that come after that specific app.use. Is that clear? Are we good to go? Assignment number 1 done. Can we move on to some commonly used middlewares and call it a day? Second assignment is take home, and there'll be more tougher assignments eventually. Great. 93% is beautiful. Commonly used middlewares. So yaar, abhi tak we are defining our own middlewares. This is a middleware that Harkirat wrote himself. Just like external libraries, there are external middlewares that you can use. A lot of times, people have written, really smart people have written some logic that you can just use and bring into your code base. Rather than, writing this logger middleware, you can require it from somewhere. Const require middleware is equal to, logger middleware equal to require the logger library. Let's say there is a logger library that exports this, and you don't have to write this code. Similarly, there are some very commonly used middlewares that we need to know about. The first one is called express.json. And this is a little bit of a fad. Express.json actually under the hood uses a different library. If you go to the code base of Express, you will actually see this. Okay, in the code base of Express, they export .json as body parser.json. So this is the actual library that has that middleware. ये लोग बीच में बैठ गए. The Express folks said कि यार we will also export this code that someone else gave. So this code is actually written in this body parser library. If you go to the top, you will see Express people use the body-parser library. This is the original library that introduced this JSON function. Express ka code base just brought that library in Express and then exposed it to you. That is how this express.json method is written. You don't have to know this, just a side thing for you to know. Okay, this was introduced very recently. Before that, people used to use this body parser library. So you can use either one of these. You can either use the express.json middleware or the other middleware. Question is, what does it do? The express.json middleware is a built-in middleware function in Express used to parse incoming request bodies that are formatted as JSON. Used to parse incoming request bodies that are formatted as JSON. Let's see what this means. This is what we need to understand. Let me give you a very small assignment. Let me give myself a very small assignment. Convert this to a post endpoint, Harkirat. Convert. Let's just have a single endpoint called /sum. And now it is not a get endpoint. Now it is a post endpoint. Okay, that is fine. And in this post endpoint, you will get the variables A and the variable B not as a query parameter. You will not get him in the URL. The URL that will be hit will not be some dot, whatever, 100xdevs.com/sum question mark. It will not look like this. The request will go to /sum. Request yahi jayegi, but A and B will be part of the body of this request. If you remember from the slides, in HTTP, we learned a bunch of things. One such thing was the body. What was the body? Okay, when you are sending post requests, usually put requests, delete requests, you send the data in the body of the request. Now we are changing our backend server. Let me remove this. Have a sum endpoint, but inputs A and B should come from the body. That looks fine. This looks reasonable also. This code seems like it will do what it's supposed to do. Let's see if it works though. Stop, rerun. What have I done? I have introduced a post endpoint now on /sum. Wherever request comes, I get the A and the B, not from the query parameters, but from the body. Then I just return that back to the user. The code is hosted over here. how can I send a post request over here? Now, if I send a get request to /sum, it says cannot get /sum. So I cannot send a get request over here because there is no get request handler over here. I removed the get request handler. I introduced a post request handler. How can I send a post request over here? The answer is by using Postman. Postman के तो नाम में ही post है. One of the reasons it was introduced Postman as a library was because it was very hard to debug HTTP endpoints. कि तुमने ये बना दिया, how will you debug this endpoint? You cannot in the browser. Browser can only send get requests. There are ways to send post requests, But यहाँ से if you want to quickly debug, there is no easy way. So hence Postman was introduced. Now if I open Postman, I saw a very big error over here. Seems like they use Electron. I could be wrong. It's taking a long time. There is another service like Postman called Hopscotch or Postwoman. There was this project called Postwoman that was open source version of Postman that eventually got converted to Hopscotch. So it's the same thing. I can go here as well. Postman is not opening for me. So rather than going to Postman, where did I go? I went to hopscotch.io. Looks very similar to Postman. I want to send a post request to this Replit endpoint of mine with some body now, with some JSON body. What is my content type? It is JSON. What does my body look like? I have a variable which is 1 and a B variable which is 2, let's say. Very similar to Postman. Hopefully this is not very jarring. I'm sending a request with some body to the /sum endpoint or route of this specific URL. It's a post request. If I send this, do you think it runs? Do you think everything happens correctly? The answer is no. What does it say? It says cannot read property of undefined. It throws a very big error at my face. कि यार आपने request तो भेज दी, but I cannot read properties of undefined. Reading A. It says that I was trying to read A on a variable. I was not able to. I repeat, it said I was trying to read A on a variable rec.body, but rec.body came out to be undefined. That is what the error says. You see the error here as well. In Express, if there is ever a error on the server, it gets forwarded to the client as well. It doesn't in production mode, but in dev mode right now, the client can see this error as well. So this is the error. It is clearly telling you that rec.body is undefined. Let me log rec.body. If I log request.body and send that request again from Hopscotch, you will see undefined gets printed. There, what am I missing? Is this called something else? Is it called request.postbody? Is it called request.data? And the answer is no. The key is right. It is called rec.body. But in Express, if you want to send JSON data, what is our client doing? They are sending us JSON data over here. You need to first parse the JSON data. Something needs to parse the JSON data, convert it into a JavaScript object, and send it over here. Does that sound like the job of a middleware? What was the middleware supposed to do? It was supposed to do one of three things. Middlewares were supposed to do one of three things. The first one was modifying the request or the response object. What do we want? We want someone please come and modify the request object so that request.body becomes available. Why is it not available by default? Because your user could send you various types of data and Express is a generic framework. They say, मेरे को नहीं पता. There can be many types of data that comes. Whatever data you expect, उसका please आप middleware use कर लो. Please use the respective middleware. I will not parse the body for you. If you want to parse JSON data, आपको पता है कि your users are going to send you JSON data, then please use the express.json middleware. What do they say? They say express.json middleware है, इसको use कर लो. If you use this middleware, then yes, I will, this middleware will itself change the request object. This will eventually be a function only, right? This when you call, this is also confusing from time to time. Why are we calling this function Harkirat? When I had written my function logger, I had simply put the function over here. But when I use the express.json function, I have to call it. The answer is express.json. When you call this function, let middleware equal to, when you call the express.json function, it returns another function. Express.json is a function, which when you call, it returns another function. That is what you have to use over here. So express.json is a function. Basically, this express object looked something like this. Express equal to, it has JSON, which is a function which itself returns a function, which is, it has a rec, res, and next. That is why I have to call express.json here. I have to call this function so that this returned function comes over here. And that is what I send in app.use. So if you did not understand all of this, long story short is, this code you will have to put at the top of your Express code base. If you want to use or send JSON data, if you know you want to send JSON data, this is a middleware you have to use, the express.json middleware, or there's another library called body parser. So you can require that library. The name itself says body parser. This library was introduced to parse the body. People can send whatever body they want. There are various types of bodies that you can send. This library was introduced. I will let you parse any type of data. And since in our case, we want to parse JSON data, we use the body parser.json function. Or you can use the express.json function. Express library under the hood uses the body parser library. So, in the end, you are calling the same function in body parser. Let's see if it works or not now. If I stop this, save this and restart. Now, if I go to Hopscotch and send the same request, you will see the server was starting. You will see A1, B2 gets logged. Ignore the very first thing that came. Let me clear the history over here. We stop, clear history, restart. The server was starting then. Let's wait for the server to start. It has started. Now if I send a request, kya gets logged? A1, B2 gets logged here. Rec.body is indeed fine. If I comment this middleware, then it will not work. Then rec.body would be undefined. If I send it now, rec.body is undefined. If I do use this middleware, body parser.json, then rec.body does become defined. So what is this popularly available external middleware? It's the body parser middleware. What is it supposed to do? It is supposed to parse the body. Why does Express not do it itself? By Express ki marzi hai. The maintainers of Express said, we are not going to do this out of the box. There are some HTTP servers that do it. Wahan pe you don't have to write this special logic. But for Express, they said, we are not going to discriminate. You can send various types of data. If you know the data that the user is sending is JSON, please use this middleware. Only then will you get something in rec.body. Otherwise, you will not. This middleware modifies the request object before it reaches this endpoint. Do we understand this? Can we do another poll? Do we understand the very first middleware for today? External middleware that we haven't written. Someone else has written the code. We are just using it. 88% is good, I think. Happy to take doubts at the end. Let's move to the last thing. Wrap it up in 15-20 minutes. Then people can leave and I can answer more doubts. The last middleware for today. Imran asked me whatever. The last middleware for today is CORS. This is a middleware. This is also a very important concept to generally know. Cross origin resource sharing. Cross origin resource sharing. What does cross origin mean? What does origin mean to begin with? There is a website that is hosted on google.com. The origin of this website is google.com. There is another website hosted on facebook.com. Uska origin is facebook.com. Most of the times when you will be writing your code eventually for a while, you will have two different servers. You will have a front end server that will, serve your HTML files. You will have a back end server where you have your Express code written over here. So, eventually when we deploy our React applications and our MERN stack applications, you will see we have to buy two different domains, or, on the same domain, we have google.com, we have api.google.com. This hosts all of your backend code. Your node index.js happens over here. And this usually hosts your React code. Okay? If I go to google.com, same thing happens. If I go here, google.com returns me the HTML. But if you look at it, there are a bunch of other requests that go out in the background. Some of these are, here we go, apis.google.com. Now this isn't that API server. Google doesn't use this architecture. There is a separate front end and a separate backend server. God knows what they do. But if I show you another example, if I show you harkirat.classics.co.in, let's see if yahan pe I think they're also on Next.js. So this is also a bad example. There you go. If you go to harkirat.classics.co.in, the front end ka response ka origin is what? harkirat.classics.co.in. The backend ki request ka origin is harkirat.api.classics.co.in. So they have different origins. Backend is stored over here, or backend is hosted on this endpoint. If you look at the response, it returns you some JSON data, some JavaScript object notation data, very big JSON blob it returns. And this website is different from this website. They have different origins. What is the thing that we are learning about? Cross origin resource sharing, which basically means how can this front end that is hosted on harkirat.classics.co.in get data from this other endpoint, this other server that is hosted on harkirat.api.classics.co.in. How can you do cross origin resource sharing? There is some resource that this server returned. How can you use this resource over here on this harkirat.classics.co.in? You might say, Harkirat, the fetch API. We learned this yesterday. If this is harkirat.classics.co.in and this is harkirat.api.classics.co.in, then here I will just send a fetch request. Fetch harkirat.api.classics.co.in. And this will send a request over here. The server will respond back with some data. I have been able to do what? I've been able to do cross origin resource sharing. You might say that, and that looks mostly right. But does this actually work in the real life? Let's try out. Do you think this is a very big security vulnerability if this just works out of the box? Let's say I am the owner of this, harkirat.classics.co.in, and yahan pe I send a request to api.facebook.com. Then do you think api.facebook.com should return me my, whatever, let's say password? Or even better, I send a fetch request to api.hdfcbank.com. बंदा मेरी वेबसाइट पे आया. The person came to my website, harkirat.classics.co.in. I have written this HTML code here, right? I can add a script tag. I am the developer of this website. I can add a script tag that sends the request to, in the background, api.hdfcbank.com. तो क्या होगा? From the user's server, from the user's browser, the user is coming to this website. I want to buy a course. But मैंने background में एक request भेज दी. I sent a background request to their Facebook server, to their HDFC Bank. यहीं से जाएगी ना request. The request will go from here. The request will go from the user's browser. HDFC Bank will think that this user wants to send someone money. HDFC Bank will send money on that user's behalf. So can we clearly see that cross origin resource sharing should be blocked by default? By default, अगर आपका कोई server है, if you have created a backend server, api.netbanking.hdfc.co.in, you shouldn't accept cross origin requests. अगर आपके पास एक request आ रही है if you are receiving a request from a different origin, you should block that request. What happens when I go to google.com? The first request तो goes as simply. If I look at it, the first request का origin क्या होता है? The very first request says referrer policy origin. But if I go to the other ones, request headers, referrer. If I go to any of the other requests after the first one will not have it. Yeah, the first one doesn't have a referrer header क्योंकि पहली request तो human ने भेजी. This to the user sent. But all the background requests that came afterwards, they have a request header called, I want to show some of this, referrer. They have एक header browser खुद ही डाल देता है. The browser forcefully injects this header कि यार the origin here was google.com. So if you try to send a request to api.hdfcbank.com, the people at api.hdfcbank.com will block it. They will be like, यार ये तो हमारे front end से आई ही नहीं. This तो is coming from google.com. So I will block this request. So should cross origin resource sharing be allowed by default? The answer is no. Should. If I come to harkirat.classics.co.in and background में the sneaky developer has a request to api.facebook.com, hdfcbank.com, should this be allowed? No. These people should be blocking this request by default. But as you saw, यहाँ पे तो it was allowed. If I went to harkirat.classics.co.in, वहाँ पे there was an underlying request going to harkiraTAPI.classx.co.in. Even when I go to net banking or whatever, if I go to hdfcbank.com, this thing should be allowed to hit netbanking.hdfcbank.co.in. यहाँ पे भी origins are different, but HDFC Bank front end should be able to hit HDFC Bank backend. They should be allowed to do cross origin resource sharing. Even though origins are different, still this backend server should whitelist hdfcbank.com कि अच्छा यार इस front end से अगर आ रही ना request, if the request is coming from this front end, then it is fine. I will allow this request through. How can you write this code in Node.js is the question. Number one, though, you will see in Node.js by default course, requests are blocked. Or, cross origin requests are blocked, which is a good thing that should happen in Node.js, more specifically in Express. By default, the cross origin requests don't work. If you want to make them work, then you use the course middleware. Why would you want to make them work? Because भाई तुम्हारा भी तो front end back end होगा. You will have front end on one website, back end on another website. You would want कि this front end should be able to hit my back end. No one else should, but this front end should be able to hit my back end. How can you do that using the course middleware is what we want to understand next. Can we do a quick poll? To recap, course is a security feature implemented by web browsers that controls how requests on a 84% understand. It's fine. I will answer 83%. So I will answer a few questions. Let me go through the slides for the 83%. Let me finish everything up. And then, I think by 9:20 we'll be able to wrap it up. Then I'll answer your questions. I will recap. Cross origin resource sharing is a feature implemented by web browsers that controls how resources on a web server can be requested from another domain. अगर ये google.com domain है, can it request resources from api.facebook.com? No. But can facebook.com, or assume on the left there was facebook.com. This is wrong. It should say facebook.com. This should be allowed to. And this is a different example altogether. Ignore this postman request for now. Ignore the second section. Let's write some code. Let's do another assignment. Up tak you have been able to write front end and back end code. The assignment for today is, or you don't have to do it. I will do it, and eventually you can try it on your side. 1. Create a backend server in Node.js that returns the sum endpoint. ये तो हमें आता है. This तो we've already done. 2. Write an HTML file that hits this backend server using the fetch API. ठीक है? These are the two things that are asked to be done. We want to do this locally. So now we want to move locally and try all of this code out locally. This will also work on Replit. And happy to do it there as well. But let's do it locally since we did the first thing locally. If you want, eventually I can do the same thing on Replit as well. So what am I going to do? Number one, I'm going to initialize a fresh Node.js project. Now, if you want to follow along, there are steps here. But let me do it on my side once. You can just follow along by looking, and then you should code yourself eventually. Step one, I will create a fresh Express project. So I'll go to projects and cohort 3. And here I will be like, create a new directory called week 5 course. I will go to this directory and I will open this in Visual Studio Code. I'm just thinking, what do I have open here already? Let's see. Okay, nothing. Let me open this in Visual Studio Code. I'm opening it on the side. Okay, there you go. I have opened the project in Visual Studio Code. What is step 2 if you ever want to create a Node.js project? Npm init-y. Harkirat, what does this command do? It initializes the package.json over here. We've discussed that in the past. Next command, npm install express, because we want express as our HTTP server. Next thing, create index.js file. Hopefully this is, slowly becoming muscle memory. Okay, I first created the package.json file by running npm init-y. Then I installed express by running npm install express. And now I'm going to write the code. What was the code again? Const express equal to require express. Const app equal to express. And app.get sum. And let's say it's a post request. App.post sum. Const a equal to rec.body.a. Const b equal to rec.body.b. And then rest.json. Answer is a plus b. What did I miss? There should be a parse int over here. There should be a parse int over here. Cool. Is everything right? Am I missing something? I'm missing the very first middleware that we have to use, which is express.json. If I don't use this middleware, rec.body would be undefined, and hence I need to use this middleware first. That is exactly what I'm doing here. Let's try to run this. What am I missing again? App.listen 3000. That is how you create a very basic HTTP server in Express. We've done it a few times. Hopefully it was simple to digest. Node index.js. I have my backend running locally. Second step was, what was the assignment? The assignment was create the backend server in Node.js that returns a sum endpoint. Have I been able to do this? Yes, Harkirat. Second is write an HTML file that hits the backend server using the fetch API. We discussed this a little bit yesterday, the fetch API. Let's try to write a front end that hits this backend. So I'm going to create an index.html file. Let me quickly write some code over here. I will have an input box ID equal to a, type equal to text, and placeholder equal to first value, let's say. And I will have another input with ID equal to b, type text, and the placeholder will be second value. And then I will have a button on click equal to send request. And here let me write sum, or let's say find sum. I'm trying to create a typical full stack application. I have written the backend for it. I'm now writing the front end for it. The front end has two input boxes and a button. Let me now add a script tag. Doesn't matter where. I'm going to add it in the header, where I'm just defining a send request function for now, nothing else. Let me put a alert over here. Alert. Hi. Let's see what this index.html file looks like. If I open this index.html file, I see a first value, let's say 5 I can put here. Second value 2 I will put here. I will click on find sum. it alerts. It pops up an alert over here. What is this endpoint supposed to do? Sorry, what is this function called supposed to do? It is supposed to hit our backend server. It is supposed to send a fetch request. If the fetch syntax looks scary to you, what is the other thing you can use? You can use the Axios library like we discussed yesterday. What did we say? Okay, a way to send a request to a backend server is you can use this Axios library. It is an external library that will make your syntax a little bit cleaner. So let's use that. I have imported the Axios library over here. And here what do I have to do inside the send request function? Axios.post. What do I want to do? I want to send a post request because here there is a post handler. Where do I want to send it? Localhost :3000/sum. What is the body that I need to send it? A will be document.getElementById a.value, and then B would be document.getElementById b.value. What is this thing over here? It will get whatever is the value in this input box. I repeat, what is document.getElementById a? It is this input box. What is dot value? Okay, इसके अंदर क्या value है? What is the value inside this? That is the what will be put over here. What is B? Or what is this thing on the right? Okay, यहाँ पे क्या value है? Put it over here. If this feels jarring, you can do this. Const A equal to this, and then const B equal to this. And here you send, A and B. Cool. Hopefully that's clear. Let's see if this works or not. Let's see. Can we send a request to the backend or not? Okay. Now here, let me introduce one more thing. Do we understand the front end and the backend code? Before we start to test it, let's do a quick poll. I've written a basic full stack application. It has some front end code. It has some backend code. Backend code is fairly simple. Front end code is fairly simple. We are trying to see कि अगर front end is hosted on a different URL and backend is hosted on a different URL, can I do cross origin sharing or not? That is the goal. That is what we're trying to understand. Do we understand the code that I've written? Let me start a poll. Okay, already started. We do understand the code that I've written. So let's try to host it then. Let's start the front end by doing node index.js. Sorry, the backend. How can I start the front end? You might say, Harkirat, khol lo, isko. Just open this index.html here. That is true. That is one way. That is true. That is one way. But this doesn't look like a domain. This looks like a very weird file : // I want something like this. Localhost : some different port, 3001 or 3002. I want my front end to be hosted on a proper website like domain. थोड़ा website जैसा लगे. So for that, you can use, there are various ways to do this. Python, if you have an old version of Python, you could run a command that look like this. http server. This specific command, or some variation of this in Python, would serve all of your files over HTTP. I repeat, would serve all of your files over HTTP. What do we want? कि यार ये जो index.html है ना, this somehow gets served over HTTP. So how can you do that? Create a fresh folder here, let's say, random. No need to do this, but let's say we do this. Create a fresh folder here called public and put this index.html in the public folder. Okay? That is step one. I took the index.html file, put it in the public folder, cd public. And now let me just run npx serve. I repeat, what did I run? npx space serve. Harkirat, what does this command do? This command also serves a folder over HTTP. What does this command do? Basically, in the future, if you ever have two laptops, right? Yes, I have two laptops here. Recently, when I was hacking, if you go to my hacking video, the hacking was happening over here. Then a very big file I had to transfer from here to this other laptop. So how I did that was exactly this. I started a server on this laptop. I ran this command over there. this started to serve all of my files in that folder. मुझे क्या करना था? I had to take some files from this laptop, send it to the other laptop. How did I do it? I did it by going to this laptop, running this command npx serve in a specific folder, for example, public folder over here. And what did that do? That hosted my folder on my internal network. Agar this laptop, this other laptop were connected to the same Wi-Fi, then I could actually transfer files from here to here very fast. I will show you this eventually at the end of the class. Okay, how can you do this? If you ever have your friend's laptop open and you quickly want to steal their files, start an HTTP server that starts to serve all of their files. And then, on your laptop, just go to localhost : in our case, it is hosted over here, or, it is showing me this other endpoint. Okay, if you go to 192.168.1.2:52100, you will start to see this file. That will actually happen here. If I open my other laptop, and in my other laptop, I go to this other internal IP address. If I go to, let me quickly show you, 192.168.1.2:52100. Moment of truth. अरे नहीं चल रहा, चलेगा. I'm not connected to the same Wi-Fi most probably. Raven, what Wi-Fi am I connected to here? Yeah, I'm connected to different Wi-Fis. Let me connect this to the same Wi-Fi. There you go. I can see my website on the other laptop. On my other laptop, I was sort of able to host my website on not the internet, but the intranet. जो लोग भी मेरे राउटर से कनेक्टेड हैं, everyone who's connected to this Airtel_no entry Wi-Fi of mine can go here. As you can see, it also logged. क्या एक request आई. This request came from some endpoint. It came from my other laptop. So if you ever want to share files across laptops, the whole folder you can share. If I go back one folder and यहाँ पे I run npx serve, then this whole folder starts to get served over the internet, or intranet more specifically. So you can go here and look at all the files, node modules, index.js, public, and get all of those files over here. Public has just one file called index.html, which is why if I go to public, the browser just renders the index.html. But as you can see, every file I can get. So what do you have to do if you get your friend's laptop? Go to the root folder on their machine, run serve. I will not, but run serve over here. You will see all of their folders on your laptop, and start to download all of their files. Hopefully that was clear. Why did we do all of this? I did all of this so I can simply serve the front end right now. I can serve the front end on a port. So I can show you cross origin sharing. ये रहा front end hosted on localhost : 52153. ये रहा backend on localhost : 3000. Backend is hosted on a different domain than front end. Is front end able to send a request to backend? Let's see. Put 1 here, put 2 here. Open the network tab. What happens when I click on the find some button? It says request failed. Pre-flight. I would have liked to see a better error here. Local 3000/some. I did an Axios dot post only, right? Yeah, strict origin when cross origin. This request failed from, did the backend die or something? No, it didn't. I was just expecting to see a better error over here that said course, and it says something else. Am I sending a request? Oh, wow, that's exactly. I was sending a request to HTTPS. That is my bad. Where do I have to send the request? HTTP. Let me fix that. Let me refresh. Let me again send a request to the /some endpoint. What does it say? It says course error. It says ye request failed with a course error. And even if I log the response over here, const response equal to await this thing, and try to log the response dot data, you will see that data never gets logged because all of these requests are failing. If I go to the console, it says clearly, okay, has been blocked. The request at this thing from this thing. From your front end origin, you are trying to hit this backend, which is on a different origin. It has been blocked by the CORS policy. The server is not allowing any requests. This localhost colon 3000 server is not allowing any requests from this front end. It is blocking all the requests. Notice this doesn't happen on Postman. I can go to Postman and yahan se I can send a request. Yahan se I can send a post request and okay, let's send it here. And I can send a body that is, whatever. A is 1 and B is 2. If I send this, it gives me the answer because this is not the browser. This is not a background request. CORS is a restriction that matters in the browser. The vulnerability exists in the browser, right? If I go to facebook.com and under the hood piche background mein you send a request to api.google.com, that is a vulnerability. Postman mein you can send request left, right and center, doesn't matter. CORS applies to background requests. More specifically, usme be some methods only like post request or put request. Background requests that happen across domains. Yahan pe to tum localhost colon 3000 pe bhej rahe ho, right? You're sending a request here. So this will not get blocked. But if you send a background request from a different domain, it will get blocked. Do we understand how CORS is coming into the picture over here? And how I hosted the front end on a different domain, back end on a different domain, tried to send a request, did not happen, got blocked. Sort of 88%. The last thing is, how can you make it work, Kirat? And the answer is, again, there is a library, that lets you do it, which is the CORS library. So step 1 is installing that library, npm install CORS. Step 2 is requiring that library, const CORS equal to require CORS. Step 3 is adding that middleware, which is app.use CORS. As simple as that. Just add this dependency. If you want to allow requests from any front-end domain, then do this. If you want to restrict to certain domains, then you can add a list of domains like only allow from google.com front end, or let's say employee.google.com, so on and so forth. You can restrict what all front ends should be allowed to send a request. Or if you do this, then literally all front ends will be able to send a request over here. That is what this CORS middleware does. Let me restart the application, node index.js. And if I refresh now, put 2 variables here and click on find sum. Let me click on it a few times. Notice the network tab, if I send a request, they all return 200s. If I go to the console, I see answer colon 3, answer colon 3. So we're good to go. Okay? This works as expected. I'm able to send cross origin requests if I use the CORS middleware. Or I could have just hosted my front end on the same domain. I repeat, if I host my front end on the same domain, agar front end bhi localhost colon 3000 pe hi hai, then of course there is no cross origination. You can host front end and back end on the same endpoint. Sorry, the same URL. If at the top of this file, firstly let me remove CORS. I removed CORS completely. So now it should fail. But I said app.get / whenever there's a request, that's a get request that comes to the landing page. Then rest.send file /public /index.html. You don't usually do this today. Front ends and back ends are hosted separately, unless you use Next.js, in which by default they're hosted on the same domain. But let's say you did this. Ab main kya kar raha hu? I'm saying here whenever someone comes to the / endpoint, send them the HTML file. I am just sending them this complete HTML file. What will that do? That will host my front end and my back end on the same domain. So if I run this now and go to localhost colon 3000, it says path is not allowed. So let me do this. Dir name +/. Now the front end is also hosted on localhost colon 3000. Backend is also hosted on the same domain. So I don't need the CORS middleware anymore. Up to there is no cross origin requests that are going out, right? If I send a request, it is still going to localhost colon 3000 /sum. The domain is the same. Yahan pe bhi localhost colon 3000 hai, where the front end is hosted. Yahan pe bhi localhost colon 3000 hai, where the backend is hosted. So since there are no cross domains, There is no cross domain resource sharing that is happening here. But if you had separate domains, then that was the case. And how can you get rid of it? By using the coarse middleware. How can you restrict it? When you are using the coarse middleware, just make sure you specify the hosts, or domains, some key you have over here, hosts or domains, where you can specify कौन से hosts से cross origin requests should be allowed. Cool. That's all, guys. That's what the slides takes you through as well. 9:34, not too bad. How was the class? Do you understand everything? Assignments will be heavy this week. By tomorrow you will get them. By heavy I mean a lot of code that you have to write. Don't use an AI to write it. Write it yourself. And 93% is just beautiful. It's a little slow though, because this was supposed to be covered in one day, which we took 2 days for. Let me release a few offline videos so we can speed up a bit. But that's it. I'll answer questions for the next 20 minutes. We'll go from there. Thank you everyone for joining. If you understood everything, feel free to drop off. Or if you want to stick around, feel free to stick around as well. And assignments will be given by tomorrow. They'll be in the assignments repo only. People wanted there, so I'm going to post all of the assignments on 100x steps cohort 3/assignments. I'll add some for week 3 as well, and week 4. And week 5 is a lot of practice that you can do this week. All right, cool guys. Time to open chat. That is a lot of questions. Let me make this full screen. And let me start from the bottom here. So we can't send requests to Google Facebook API from the browser. You can from the browser. You may in the background, depending on whether or not they block requests from other origins. They might not. Some requests they block, some requests they don't. And you have said Postman is not a browser. So can we send those requests from Postman? 100%. Go to any requests. That is how hacking 101 happens. The way hacking happens is you go to app100xfs.com. You see कौन सी requests जा रही हैं भाई. Let me click on network tab here. Let me see what requests are going out to api.100xfs.com, let's say. You get those requests. Achha, this is the request that I want to capture. Then you copy that request. You copy that request as curl. You go to Postman. You paste that. My Postman isn't working, but you paste that request as curl, and you start hacking. Just find my hacking video on Neat on YouTube. Someone has posted it. So you can see this. Postman. Any request to any Facebook server that is being sent from the browser, you can send from Postman. Let me push this code as well, so everyone who wants to see this code can see it. A few people are asking for it. A few people are dying for it. Not git ignore. Sorry, that's a meme. Modules. And that's it. You're dying for it, Get off my pack. I don't know how many of you guys have seen this. Okay. 100x devs cohort 3. A few people, one person asked for the front end code. So let me just push the whole code. Week 5, class 2. There you go. I'm going to paste the link to the repo in the chat. You can find the index.html file there. All right. Moving on. Can you do npm serve again? Yes. So, आपके पास, if you ever want to share files on your intranet, a lot of times on, back in 2014 when I was in college, when cloud wasn't a thing or we did not have money to, rent cloud, we had our own server. So, वहाँ पे we had to host websites from time to time. A lot of the websites were hosted on the intranet. Intranet means they were only accessible in IIT Roorkee campus. If you went to musi.sdslabs.co in IIT Bombay, it wouldn't work. If you went inside IIT Roorkee, it did work. If you went inside Chandigarh, it wouldn't work because this pointed to a private IP, 192.168.something, which was only accessible inside the IIT Roorkee intranet. It would point to a server on the intranet. And similarly today, if you have your house where you want to host a website only for your housemates, then you can go to that folder that you want to serve and just run the command. For example, I'm in this public folder. it has one folder here called index.html. I can run the command npx serve. Now I can visit it on localhost colon 3000, and anyone inside my house who's connected to the same Wi-Fi, Airtel underscore no entry, can actually visit it on this endpoint. This 192.168.1.2 points to my machine on this intranet. If you are currently in IIT Bombay, or whatever, just an example I'm taking, in your college, JP Mesra, then you, sorry, it's a bad joke. Then if you go here, you will not reach my machine. You'll reach some other machine on your intranet. So, this is just a private IP. And as you can see, it is 1.2 on this machine. It was 1.3 on this laptop. So, they are very close. We don't have too many machines in this house. But if we did, 1.4 would be a fourth machine. Let's say my washing machine, which has Wi-Fi, my fridge, which has Wi-Fi, my Alexa, which has Wi-Fi, so on and so forth. So every device you connect to the Wi-Fi gets an IP address to identify it. My laptop is 192.168.1.2. Most probably my sister's laptop is 1.1. My other laptop is 1.3, so on and so forth. And that's how we can discover each other's devices. Only if something is hosted somewhere. Abhi yahan pe I'm hosting something on port 3000, which is why other people on my internet can access it. How do you hack your friend's machine? Go to your friend's machine, go to the root folder, run the npx serve command, press enter. You will see all of their files there, start to download them. All right. Where was I? Chat. Notion doc. Bookmarks check नहीं किया यार, आज करता हूँ. After the class I'll do it. I am getting this error. You wrote edsamev29@gmail.com, but you didn't write anything after that. Few more Notion docs. Another project. Notion doc. Notion doc. भैया bookmark check कर लिए नहीं किए. I shared that and this, and someone wrote some code and a bunch of other Notion docs. All right. This I bookmarked. This will somehow. How can I get in touch? Akash, please, let's get in touch with Bharat and let's see how if we can integrate these somehow. It would be nice. These have the lecture notes and the assignments. This will be super useful to a lot of people. So let's get this more visibility. Somehow maybe integrate this directly in app.headexcess.com. So let's, Akash, please get in touch with Bharat. Let's go from there. This is very cool, very helpful. Thank you. We'll get you a bounty. Course, how does resource sharing between two applications works? The pre-flight mechanism, and how is it different from a simple request? Great question. So pre-flight mechanism is whenever you are sending these course requests, right? You will see from time to time, for example, when we were sending a request, on our front end, it was sending two requests. One of them is what's called the pre-flight request. The way under the hood, the way course works is, and I'm happy to dive deeper into this, is when you send a request for some of these methods, like the post method, you first send a pre-flight request, jisme the server responds back with some headers. The server, as I said, the server can also respond back with some headers. There's a specific header that, the server responds with, which I totally forgot. And when that header comes to the front end, then the browser is like, I can send that request. The browser sends that request to the server. So if you look at the code of course, let's quickly, try to look at the code of the course library on GitHub. Most probably will not be a lot of lines of code. Lib index, it's a simple index.js file. What does it do? It exports a function. There you go. This star. These are all headers that, there's this one header over here, most probably this one, but I could be wrong. Access control allow origin value star. If you send back this specific header from your server in the pre-flight request, then your browser is like, ठीक है भाई, भेजो request, कोई issue नहीं है. The server is allowing cross origin requests. But if you have some specific domains, then the browser will check, is the domain that I am sending the request from same as this one? If not, then it will not send the request. The goal is the browser is protecting you from sending requests to a weird domain, not a weird domain, like a netbanking.hdfcbank.com domain from a different website. So the way that happens is, whoever has written the server, let's say the HDFC folks, they will tell you in a header, allow this domain or don't allow this domain, and based on that your browser will block the second request. That is how CORS works under the hood. I'm happy to dive more deeper into this in a video or here, but yeah, under the hood, CORS returns, depends on a header being returned from the server. If you look at the code of this CORS library, you'll find the same thing here. And the pre-flight request is, as the name suggests, a pre-flight request. Before the main request goes, a request goes out, and based on the headers on that response, does the main request go out, or the main request gets blocked or not. All right, that was a good question. And back to the Notion docs. RJS, your page is blocked, and this is done. So looks like Umesh 0. I remember this, but I will also not run this locally, sir. Because you are a student. What if you have something weird in this library? Let's see. Let's expose you if that is the case. Most probably that is not the case. But if I go to npm.js, express, from a while you are asking me to use this locally. What does this do? Let's look at it. Umesh 10. What does your package do? If you look at the code, you print something. Yeah, the chalk library seems like a CLI. It is good. I looked at your code. I think that's good enough. I did not run it locally because what if you're accessing some of my files here and sending that file content to your server? That would be so funny if one day I come to class and I'm like, here is a new library called Kirath Hacker. Please run npm install Kirath Hacker, and you guys run it, and I just get all of your private keys. But you get the idea. I'm be very sure of what libraries you're running locally. This looks great, but I'm not going to run it. What does it do? You should mention that here. But cool hai. This is done. Your Web3 hub in one link. It's like linear with Web3. What is this? This looks very good. Join 50 million users in simplifying the digital presence with a link tree. Connect your Web3 projects all in one place. Connect your Web3 projects all in one place. What is this? Is it just a landing page? Okay, that looks good. Some dashboards. Okay, is it like a place where I can come and see my, portfolio, things like these? Nothing happened after I connected. That's probably because I have an empty wallet. But yeah, the front looks good. So I need help. Others keep saying unique project, good project, but a unique project, how will you find a job and grow startup? Please, okay, unique project statement. Will that project statement remain unique if I say it over here? Plus, at the same time, I have like 4 videos on YouTube, 10 project ideas to build. Go to the oldest one. वो कोई नहीं बना रहा होगा. Try to build one of those. But usually the best thing to build is something that gives you personal motivation. All the projects that I build on YouTube are also projects that give me some personal motivation. Would be nice if this was built. So, try to build something like that. All right. This repo is done. Feedback. Sir, yesterday I told you I'm complete beginner. I connected my front end to the back end, which saves the file in external JSON, but you did not go to the link. Here is the link. Please go through the assignments also. Yesterday, both assignments and even the third rate limiter one, which was in the offline middleware video, a bit tough one. That was a nice one. And codes for all 3 are below. I'm just going to look at the toughest one for you, sir, which is this one. You don't need to put a name over here. This can be an anonymous function. User ID. Anything else plus equal to 1. Does this work without an initial condition? Maybe. No, okay, there you go. You have that over here. Next. And what is happening here? Set interval. Number of requests for user equal to empty. Okay, this is. So this looks good. This is like an easy implementation of it. But What is the problem? Can you tell? What if the user sends you 5 requests? How do I tell this? Basically, what you're doing here is every 1 second you're clearing this global object, right? That is good. That is one way to do it. But the more elegant way is, if I send a request right now, मैंने अभी भेजी, so my clock starts right now. Now for the next 5 seconds, I should only be able to send 5 requests. What you're doing here में इसमें होगा क्या? कि let's say, this interval is running and it started to run and ये 900th millisecond पे पहुंच गया. It reached the 900th millisecond. User sent 5 requests. You said all 5 are allowed. Then 100 milliseconds passed by. The global variable got reset. Then the user sent 5 more requests. Now the user was able to send you 10 requests in a span of 100 milliseconds. So is your server really rate limiting them? Sort of, but the answer, you get the idea. There's a more elegant way to do this. This is the easier way to do it. More elegant way is, every user you somehow maintain a different clock. Now this user hasn't sent a request in the last 1 second. Right now you have a global clock right now. Hopefully the problem is clear. That's how you can make this a little bit better. Clock right now. Hopefully the problem is clear. That's how you can make this a little bit better. And ye kya hai bhai? Very nice. Usually just share the code and have some screenshots there, but this is also very good. And very good, sir. Please add offline videos possible for map filter reduce. I think I added for map filter and one more, I forgot which one. Slice reduce splice I can add. Akash, just take a note. We also take a screen. I have completed week 5 assignment which was given in the Notion. This looks good. And just look at the middleware. Looks decent. And the other one that looks good as well. Great work, sir. And good. All right, that was easy. 9:50. We'll do 10 more minutes and we'll call it. Someone said, DM what 200x devs Twitter. Oh boy, another round of a lot of Notion docs. So last wala nahi aaya course ka. Try to go through the video after the class. Try to go through some other resources after the class. Agar 93% को समझ आया मेरे भाई, then chew a little bit of glass. थोड़ा सा मेहनत करने की कोशिश करो. You might find it. If not, TAs are there. And if it still gets really hard, then tag me. Happy to help further by, however I can. But, trust me, another video from me is not going to help here. It might actually, but, let's see if you can figure this out yourself. If not, let us know. Can we send body in a GET request? I don't think you can. I think you cannot only. I could be wrong, but I think most probably my memory tells me you cannot send body in a GET request. I could be wrong. We can try out very quickly. Go to Postman, send a GET request, send somebody, see if you get it on the back end. I think you won't. I could be wrong. Okay, let's start. Someone else is also creating week by week notes. Oh wow, you are the same person. Can you also get in touch with Akash? Just ping 100x devs Twitter. Can you get in touch with Akash? These are good slides. They'll help us out. And we can figure out a way to get you paid as well. Hi Bhaiya, I wanted to share that projects I've been working on for almost a week now. I was late to the Solana contest. I made hurriedly. Oh, that is fine. And I will look at them when I reach there. And also Phantom is blocking me for some reason. But I'll look at the final submissions. I'm the one who will find the, decide the bounties. There are 223 submissions apparently. So there is competition, but still I think 50 teams would win. So your chances of winning are decent. As in like 25%, much better odds than everything else in the world. I'm establishing Python backend. This thing I feel strong in logics, but when I do web-based, I feel a little weird. How can I build necessary skills? It is not important. It depends, yaar. Today there are so many libraries that make your life this easy if you want to write front end. So I also personally don't spend too much time until I have to. So when you are writing front end code, make sure it is very polished. If you can avoid it, great. If your team has a front-end engineer, great. If you're not interviewing for a front-end role, great. But if you are a front-end engineer, then you should write good code. You shouldn't hopefully have to design it, which, basically means a lot of grunt work of copying classes from Prisma and, Figma and copying them over. As in the end, as proof of work, you should create how difficult is it? You should have 3-4 full stack websites deployed on the internet. It's like so easy, So a lot of times, from time to time, people want to hire someone. What is the easiest way for us to filter out projects or GitHub contributions? So, keep one of these two things handy. Generally, it'll help. Hey Vasu, I want the previous offline video on middleware that you uploaded a day before yesterday. Fantastic lecture, by the way. Oh, thank you. The concepts were crystal clear and it really helped me solve yesterday's assignment. If you have a moment, can you please review my work? Alrighty. Request counter, log request, and produce both of them. Anytime a request comes here, try to log them in the same line with comma secret values. That's how usually request logs are put. If you ever see Nginx logs, we'll get to what Nginx is, but they're all shoved in the same line. So try to keep them in the same line. Everything else looks good. I've also coded the hard assignment of coding the to-do backend on store the JSON data. It took me around 3 hours to figure out and implement. I'm not sure if I've used the most efficient approach of cut functionalities. Let's see. Here the there is nothing is efficient. It's like really bad because what if you read the file twice from two different endpoints? You'll end up overwriting each other. This is why you eventually use databases. So don't worry about this code being bad. This is just for some testing. This will anyways not work in production. Multiple route handlers will try to access the file at the same time. They'll end up overwriting each other. This is just for testing. And wow, you've written a lot of code. Why is that? Delete task. Delete to do. Yeah, this looks good. This is exactly what I was expected. Which is Sunday night. You read the file and then return the to-dos. If it's a get to-dos, write to-dos will. Okay, that's just for writing to the file. Read file will. Promisify. Great. I mean, you understand promises very well is one thing I can tell you. You've written the promisified versions of fs.read file. So you are sorted everything, every difficult bit that needed to be covered by now you've already done. So that's good. All right. Yeah, we'll see. We'll let you know. And Noida mein hi ho raha, that's for sure. So if you were in the Noida lot, your chances increased by twice because 50% almost were Bangalore, 50% Noida. And then, we're trying our best to filter the best way, you'll know in like a week or so. Create a SaaS prototype in 1 day. Wow. All right. Oh, I think you tagged on Twitter. I saw that. Pretty cool. UIs look a little janky. Let's try to log in. Fuck. All right. After you log in, you go to the dashboard. After you go to the dashboard, oh, the website you want to monitor. Great. Let's see what else do you do here. I'm getting sick of these other folks. They have like a paid plan for calling. It's fine. You pay for technology, but I don't. So I only have my email linked right now. So whenever ad.nexus.com goes down, I receive an email and my email is so spammed right now that notification gets missed. So it would be nice if I get a call, but if I'm being honest, these days my number is leaked so bad that I also keep receive a lot of calls and ignore them. But the good thing about BetaStack is when they call from a US number, so I know the website is down. And okay, this is stuck here, but keep building it. Add the calling functionality. If my website is down, it calls me, and that's a good thing to add. Feedback on this. Oh, yeah, you can improve the UI for sure. It's great for a beginner. It's amazing for a beginner, but oh wow. You got 17 upvotes on a product as well. That's pretty good. What is this that you were able to put there? AI Bud. I'm scared. Is it going to give me an image of an Arabic woman that's white and has a wrap dress? Let's see. Assignments, great. I'm not reviewing each one of them, but good work. Anyone's doing the assignments, do it for yourself. Feel free to share them with me or on Twitter. But in the end, what is going to help you is doing a lot of these and having them stacked up on your GitHub. All right. If you build this for the hackathon, great. Would love to look at this peer-to-peer decentralized network for new era of secure, transparent, efficient financial loans. I would love to look at this, the contract, whatever you've written. I don't have the mental capacity at the moment, but if you submit it, I will be reviewing it, so I'll look at it. Alrighty. Yeah, it is just for the dress. That's good. Good. What are you using under the hood? Just out of curiosity, let's see if I can figure that out. AI.API daily quota is exceeded. Okay. You did not make me sign in though. So how do you know my daily quota is exceeded? Applications, local storage. You're not storing it here. Where are you storing? Okay, my daily this thing is done. Okay, I'm curious now. I'm trying to debug if, okay, basically if I go to the incognito window. Oh, I did log in. You made me log in. Did you? I don't know. Daily quota exceeded. And even incognito, it knows that my daily quota is exceeded. How are you doing that, Abdul? I'm assuming your name is Abdul considering, oh sorry, I Bud hai. I thought it's Aidul or something related to your name. I could be wrong. I am wrong. Most probably your name isn't Abdul, but how are you doing this? How do you know I have sent a request from the browser? What are you sending here? So the request is going to the backend. Some level, some fingerprinting you have here. Okay, let's try the biggest test. If I go to Brave and send a request, does that happen? That also doesn't happen. Do you have like IP checks? Opening chat here for whoever owns this website. How are you checking? I'm just curious. Okay, how are you checking the person has already used their quota? Do you have IP checks? Do you have some other checks? Most probably I assume you are. अरे यार उसको मैसेज कर ले दो ना यार. Yep, hopefully this person. Did that person leave? Probably did. Yeah, if I turn on oh yeah, that's the best test, right? But if I turn on the VPN, you guys will lose my video. That is a test I want to do. And let's say I do it, but you'll lose my video for a second here. Let me quickly connect to the US and try. Most probably it will work then. I'll see you guys in a second. Yeah, it worked. Sorry about that. Hopefully you guys see me again. It is an IP check most probably. Oh. Did the class end? No. Chat. Can you guys see me again? Can you, or like, were you able to see me through? I don't know. Can you see me? All right. So yeah, it did work when I changed to Proton or changed connected by the VPN. So yes, they most probably have an IP check. Alrighty. Didn't understand the postman stuff and sending requests. What's happening after middleware? I understood. भैया थोड़ा fast हो रहा है. भाई मेरे देखो 93% is able to understand तो fast तो नहीं हो रहा थोड़ा. You might be a complete beginner and you need to work very hard for the next 1 week. And let me see if you have more doubts, Krishna. But the world is very unfair. This is a filtered lot of so many people who want to learn full stack, who are willing to spend so much money to get into a full stack course and also coming to live classes. उस इतने motivated lot में the 93%, if you are not there, 93%, then life is, you get the idea. It's like going to be very hard after this. So, spend some time, code a lot yourself. And if you have any doubts, TAs are there. I'm also there. Let me know. What is the difference between fetch and Axios? Why don't we use fetch? What does Axios does? Copy this. Paste it over here. Let's see what does it say. Ooh, it linked me to a blog post. Let me read through this blog post. What does it say? Axios and Fetch are both libraries that are used for making HTTP requests and fetching data from a server. इतना तो समझ आ गया कि both of them are used for sending a request to a server, getting back a response. However, there are few differences. Number one, API design. Axios, अब ये पढ़ने जाओगे तो भाई बहुत ज़्यादा घुसना पड़ेगा, but Axios is built on top of another XML HTTP request object. That is basically, there are many ways to send requests from a server. The oldest one was this one, and then Fetch was a newer API. So Fetch uses some modern APIs. This uses a different. ठीक है. Browser compatibility. ठीक है. I mean, देखो, this is probably going to confuse you a little bit more because this goes into more detail. कि अच्छा, if you have this question, तो भाई तो you want to know the actual internal differences between Axios and Fetch. I'm trying to see if I can find, one that gives you the simplest differences, which is, I'm assuming, what you need. Axios is a third party HTTP client library. What does third party mean? कि natively browser में नहीं आती है. If I go to the browser and click on fetch or type fetch, it says fetch तो कुछ function दे रहा है. If I type Axios, it returns me nothing. So this is a third party library. You can add it to your project via a CDN. That is exactly what we did. Fetch, like Axios, is a promise based HTTP client. It is a built in API and hence we don't have to install or import anything. So this is the biggest difference. कि ये built in आती है. This is an external library. Both of them let you do the same thing. Send a request to a backend server. इसका syntax थोड़ा cleaner होता है लिखने में. It's a slightly easier to write this, which is why people try to use Axios. But we have a video called Axios versus Fetch from cohort 2. I will post this. You can just look at that video. All right. When we are searching google.com, why is it sending our ID and password? Why is it required? Because we are already signed in. If I'm not signed in, what will it send in the request? So it is not sending an ID and password. It sends something else called the cookies. Next week, we will understand authentication. वहाँ पे you will understand what exactly it sends, when does it send it, when you sign out, what happens. All of this will be covered next week when we reach authentication. ये question should get cleared then. Can you please keep your cam on the video which you post offline? Okay, I will try that. I've seen I'm a little more calm when I'm not focused on, how I look. In the camera, I can, make faces while I'm recording, but I'll try. I'll do a poll on this and based on that we can decide. In the last video was damn good and funny. Which one? So like, Samay one or the other, I don't know. Either one, okay. But like, good, thank you. Alrighty. Cool, guys. We will call it here. Thank you all for joining. Yeah. We will have a few offline videos next week. We'll have a lot of assignments for you to do. Don't break the momentum. Trust me, 12 weeks. And since we're going this slow, maybe 15 weeks is all you need. If you come to every live class in 15 weeks, and if you're able to be in the top 85%, then, you will eject off very quickly, by which I mean, आप अपने projects खुद बनाने लग जाओगे. You will start to make your own projects. And then the journey is just finding a quick internship and then finding the job. So don't lose momentum is all I will say. And this isn't too difficult, irrespective of which stack. This is one stack, then you can move to a Java stack, you move to Golang, Rust, whatever. Everywhere the goal is the same. Please be very consistent and please code a lot yourself. Until a point, it is good to look at videos. Eventually, write your own code without using an AI, by which I mean don't have AI code editors on, don't have, whatever, Copilot on. Try to code everything yourself, try to memorize syntax. It helps. Irrespective of what anyone says, it helps if you know syntax well, all right? With that, we'll end it. I will see you guys tomorrow or next week. Or in a few offline videos. Good night, guys. And let me pick up 1-2 Notion docs really quickly, then I will call it. Web-based wallet, someone created a Japanese web-based wallet. Oh, arigato gozaimasu. Sakurawallet.vercel.app. Oh boy. Very nice. इतना ही आता था मुझे. Arigato gozaimasu. Looks very good. Not very Japanese UI. Japanese UI are so. Let me share my screen if you guys want to see as well, or you can see in the offline recording as well. But this is what the guy made. It's a Japanese website that lets you create a wallet and proceed. And you see your balances. Seems hard-coded at the moment, but yeah, very good UI. And I wouldn't call it very Japanese. Japanese UIs are like very cluttered. I still keep receiving emails. I bought a phone number and I even opened a bank account. I have no idea what is happening there. I never closed them. So I keep receiving mails from time to time. They're like very cluttered websites, but this looks pretty good, man. Arigato gozaimasu. Itna hi aata mujhe. All movies, a little cluttered of a UI. You can do much better. If you're a starter, then it's cool. But you can make it a little better. Question bank feature. Oh, this is for that exam thingy. Oh, you've done it already. Okay. This is for that exam thingy. Oh, you've done it already. Okay. Let me see if someone can review it. I don't think I'll have the time next week because of Super 30, but let me see if someone can review it. New UI, not bad. You have like a question creator. I like that. I fucking love this. Very nice, sir. Very nice. You've gone the extra mile. Let me tag someone here. Yeah, very good. Very, very needed for an apps like this. Like, you have the eye for what is needed, as a, you get the idea. You're product manager, you put on your product manager hat when you build this, which is, something you should do. All right. We'll call it here, guys. Have a good night. Bye bye.